you back there, you've been to every single one of these gaming things. I think that's awesome. Thank you for coming. We've been talking a lot about gaming. I feel the past 24 hours, all we have talked about is gaming, and that we may need to take this show on the road. Yeah, I think so. This is the good, bad, and ugly of video games, and I'm glad some of you guys weren't in the other two, because we might be repeating ourselves a little bit here. But we've added esports into the mix. My name is Jennifer. I forgot who I was just for a minute. Jennifer Kite-Powell. I write for Forbes. I cover innovation and technology. Sometimes includes games if it's very tech related or there's an inspiring storyline. Another good question guy in the back. I see you. Hi. And I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves again because I think people like to do that. And we haven't heard from you yet, so go.
Okay. I'll turn it on. I am Dr. Chris Haskell. I'm a professor, associate professor at Boise State University.
Do we have to call you doctor or professor?
Honestly, my wife's the only one who calls me Chris, so Doc is fine.
We have to call you that? Really?
Haskell is fine.
Oh, right on.
Hey, you.
Okay.
That works.
Okay.
I'm the associate professor in educational technology, but the greatest scam I've ever perpetrated is
I think so. I think we're definitely going to get to that scam. Yeah. Ladies.
I'm Carrie Young. I'm a video game writer. I work for Warner Brothers Games, where I'm the lead writer. I've been in the industry for about 10 years. I've worked at Ubisoft. I've worked on Assassin's Creed titles, Assassin's Creed 3, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, most recently Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I'm working on an unannounced title for Warner Brothers Games right now. So,
but she can't tell us. She can't tell us what she's working on because I asked her 2 days ago.
Really cool.
Hi, my name is Lemay. I'm currently a narrative director at Warner Brothers Games Montreal. I work with her. I have been working in the industry since 1997. I've made a lot of games. I'm not going to list them all. We're going to be here for the whole thing. And I forgot some of them anyway, and that would be embarrassing. I did a lot of different things. I've been a comm dev when it was easy to do. It's complicated now. Please respect your comm devs. I've been a UI designer. I've been a UX designer. I have also done game design. And I am now I was a writer and I am now a director. Okay, I'm not allowed to write anymore. They don't let me.
Well, we got Carrie now, so we have this is a kind of a strange panel actually, and Chris will tell you. I asked him on email, why are you on this panel? Why did they put you on this panel? You just show up. So we got AAA games, and now we have esports. So we're calling those games. Yes, I'll play Devil's Advocate today, and we have mobile games, right, in the gaming world. And so we thought about maybe we would start with the good, bad, and the ugly of games, but maybe we would start with the elitism of games, and where we would put that. Either that's good, bad, or ugly, probably ugly, and talk a little bit about what you guys think about this elitism in games, where people think mobile games aren't games and AAA is the only way to go, but then Chris and his big scam job here with esports could be the new thing. So I put it to you. Let's talk about elitism in games.
And I'll bridge this together. One of the reasons I think it's good that I get to be here. My colleague Lisa Dolly and I built the world's first game-based learning management system.
Really?
Yeah.
Boise?
So we were always thinking about narrative and how you create a narrative that drives you forward through a curriculum. How do you turn something that is mandatory into something that you want to do? And choice is one of those big things I'm sure you guys can talk about all day. But the other thing that I think connects strongly with esports and even with the elitism is we're constantly concerned about what the story is. We broadcast 200 plus hours of our own content per semester. And so we're always concerned with how do you tell a story in a compelling way that makes somebody want to engage in it.
But what do you mean by that? Because we can talk about storyline. I mean, I think the story part is super important. We were talking about this earlier. But where do you think esports fits into this concept of what's the, AAA games? I think, it's my opinion, it's up here, and then there's like esports over here, and then mobile gaming. But mobile gaming is huge, and it's still gaming.
Absolutely,
I mean, do you think?
yeah.
I guess my question is, do you think there is some prejudice against other types of gaming if they're not AAA?
You know, because there's so many that cross over back and forth, maybe so. I think of Blizzard's Hearthstone title as being one of the most, I mean, I think it's their most profitable platform. Certainly, I've spent more money on that than I should. But it is primarily mobile. You can play it, you know, in a more of a AAA form, but they found a way to make that platform feel the same as others. But I think that there's some prejudice because most of the money around esports events comes from the publisher. They're putting the big money forward to make it compelling and exciting and put on the event
And are
stage.
some of those publishers just like the underpinning for all the games, or are they very siloed?
Honestly, I don't know how to answer that one.
I don't even know if that's a real question.
No,
Okay.
I don't. What I wanted to bring up about the elitism in games is that people look down on what they think is not a real game. And to me that is very vexing, because I'm going to go with the saying, a rose is a rose is a rose. Well, a gamer is a gamer is a gamer. It doesn't matter if you're playing mobile games. It doesn't matter if you're playing visual novels. I don't care if you're playing tic-tac-toe on your computer. Or if you're playing the big shooters or the more AAA Mass Effect and stuff. Or esports. They're all video games. They are a form of entertainment you choose to engage with on digital media.
We're going to
That's all we need to know.
Minesweeper Scholarship next year.
Minesweeper Scholarship is freaking fantastic.
That's good. That's one of the goods.
So yeah, so every now and then you rear up with the gatekeepers who go, oh, unless you know this or you play this, you're not a real gamer. And I mean, honestly, there's no real such thing as a real gamer. You engage in the media, then you are. And one of the things I find I often have to do is I will go up to, people come up to me and say, oh, I played this on the mobile, but I'm not actually a gamer. And I'm like, well, actually you are, because you engage with a video game. That's all there is to it.
Where do you think that comes from, that stereotype, that sort of elitism? Where does that stem from?
That is a deep one. So there's the whole, when D&D was started and it was like seen as a gateway to Satanism, and when back in the day, and I'm saying it's like when Star Trek wasn't mass pop. Like now I can say Beam Me Up Scotty, and most people know what I mean, right? There was a day where you had a certain tribal feeling of belonging because you were part of a small group who engaged in this activity, and you could face outwards towards all your detractors, right? The thing is that this no longer applies. Video games are mass market. You get movies made out of video games. It doesn't get bigger than that, y'all. So I think it's a mentality of wanting to have that small space all to yourself, when in reality, it's never really been just a small community, and a lot of people engage in this. You just necessarily didn't see them all the time. We see it in SNF as well. People are like, oh, science fiction is for men. Well, Star Trek was kept on the air because women organized conventions and campaigns in order to keep it alive. So I think it's a very delicate question, but it's also just a sense of how much you see out there versus how much you think is out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up science fiction actually, because I'm really involved in the science fiction community and in the gaming community, and I see it on both sides where people, once you're entrenched in a certain atmosphere and the people around you are playing all the same kinds of games, then there becomes this, it's like a community in-group where it's like we have all played X, Y, and Z games and we know about X, Y, and Z games, and anyone who don't can't call themselves the same thing as us, and it's utter nonsense. And it really excludes people, so I think we need to branch out more. We need to recognize it's like there are mobile gamers, there are people who play competitively, but there are also people who just like play in their living room. Like my brother, when Halo came out, he and his friends were actually like packing up their Xboxes and their televisions in their cars because it didn't have the first one didn't have split screen co-op, but they were like driving to each other's houses to play Halo together.
To play together. And this, I think, is maybe a good segue to go into this together part of gaming, which esports has created. That's something we talked about earlier in the all I've been talking about is gaming for the past 3 days, but we talked about the evolution of getting back into the arcade, with virtual reality. So we started alone, and then I played with a long cable, and then we went driving in their cars to still play with people, and then online came, and then we became so isolated, sort of in this echo chamber with ourselves, but connected to other people that we couldn't see. But do you think esports kind of grew out of that need, maybe in a way, to to connect again? I don't know. I mean, to do something together, for the love of the sport.
Yes.
I would argue that video game culture even goes back to the arcade, and I have a collection of vintage arcade games at my home, and
over.
some in my office. I have 8. We can run down the list, but know that there's a 1978 Space Invaders and a 1979 Asteroids and a 1980 original Pac-Man white marquee.
His address is...
Yes, and you're welcome to come over at any time and play. These guys have actually played some of these games, I'm pretty sure. You guys know? No? Oh, I'll invite you next time. That's right. But back in when it was arcades, you would stand back and watch really great players. You'd try to figure out what they were doing. You try to get tips from them. You'd put your quarter on the bezel or the marquee to call next. And it was very social then, especially with games like I'm thinking Dirk the Daring from Dragon Slayer. It's like, wait, how do you get past that? You know, how did that person do that? And they used to put monitors on top so that people could stand around and watch these things. So that could be I would say it's been social from the start.
The beginning of esport monitors on top of arcade machines. I never saw that, but that's kind of a good point.
Yeah, big arcades, and you just attract a lot of attention. And those big arcades would do events. I mean, with the entire cabinet up there on stage.
Where did we actually make this huge leap into esports? I mean, because
broadcasting.
Okay.
The ability to broadcast without that any of us can broadcast. It's the democratization of streaming services. When it was television networks making the decisions, they'd say, you know, half an hour for this kind of goofy game show, you know, on Nickelodeon about playing games. But when we got to decide what was worth watching, and we had tools to be able to put that out there, then we opened it up. In the same way that cons now bring together what we would think are really small groups that love a game or a topic or a TV show, and they allow those people to gather and do what they want to do.
I lived in London in 2014, and they were talking about making an e-stadium. And there's all this controversy, so we did a bunch of podcasts about esports, e-stadium. We're actually going to take a virtual game and then put us in a physical place to all be together. And people were very, very kind of either up in arms over it or yay. So, I mean, do you think it's taken a while for esports to become like acceptable and mainstream, or do you think it's going to still with collegiate or?
Yeah, you know, I don't think so. I don't think it's taken that long, because the people who've been interested have always been gravitating to it, whether they go to physical events, you know, the PAX and things like that have always attracted people that want to watch, say, Smash or watch Rocket League or watch one of these other games. You mentioned, you know, an arena. Boise State has a collegiate arena 1 block from here, where we actually host, you know, head-to-head matches.
I need to come and see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of it's out right there. We'll do that at 3. But I think that people have always been looking. Now, big money is very interested. TBS and ESPN, they're like, whoa, let's do this. But we've never needed their permission to do the things that we wanted.
Oh, that's interesting. Before, they had the TV, and then they would only give you 30 minutes. And now they're all broadcast. I read that was one of the trends. Like, now you've got this big business broadcasting coming back in. And now you don't need them. You don't really need them, right?
Yeah.
Is that the good or the...
Well, and also the internet, because we can do live Twitch broadcasting streaming, right? Like it's defeated a lot of the we've gone beyond the broadcasting, traditional broadcasting, to something that really has been breaking away all borders, which is what the internet does. But also, people make a living out of being esports. People like, we know Stephanie Harvey. Miss Harvey, that's what she does for a living now. She goes across the world promoting it as a sport. And I mean, I think even for a while there were being talks about making it an Olympic sport, maybe. So.
It is. 2020 and 2024.
There you go. I mean, you don't get much more legit than that, right?
What do you guys think about that? Esports, Olympic sport. Are we doing live? No, librarians making a face. I didn't get your name, that's why I'm calling you librarian. Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
It brings people who don't have the capabilities in the physical aspect, because the Olympics always have been who's biggest, strongest, fastest.
Totally.
Now it comes down to who's got the most tactile reflexes, smarts.
I like that.
So it's a whole different angle.
And that should be represented there. I mean, it's not just about the fastest, right?
It's still entertainment. I mean,
Yeah. It's still entertainment. That's a very good point. It's all entertainment.
Very much.
watching esports game versus watching a golf game, tell me which one's more interesting, because there's...
Yeah, but a golf man.
I do like
so
golf.
tasty.
Okay, so can we put esports, do we think esports is the good, bad, and the ugly, or do we think it's a good thing? And this thing is good, bad, and the ugly, so I have to put it somewhere.
Yeah, esports is definitely in the good.
Okay,
but
right on.
Like everything else that's got facets,
Yeah.
right? Some stuff is bad, some stuff is ugly, but that's across the board.
It feels like it's gone really fast, though. Grown very
Is
fast.
it messing up good game design though? Is it messing up good game design?
It's different game design. Like oh my god, there's so many genres. The esports genre has its own game design, but like Counter-Strike was not designed to be an esports thing at first. It was just Counter-Strike, and it got adopted, and it evolved into that. Whereas now we have games that are designed against that. But then I'm not enough of an expert, but I would question, are they basing themselves off the originators of the genre, which was not originally meant for that? And then what are they exploring that's new? Because you look at Hearthstone, and Hearthstone is a card game. It is essentially a digital board game, and that became an esport for a while.
Yeah.
So it's you know, we're still exploring and trying all sorts of new different things, which I think is a hallmark of video games.
We sent a team to national championships in Hearthstone last year.
What is ugly about video games? Can we talk about something that's ugly? And I don't mean graphics. I mean, what's the deepest, darkest thing that's affecting the industry that we need to change? Is that you want to make you had a question? I'm going to bring this back because oddly, it's better if everybody can hear you, not just me.
Are esports going to evolve to kind of take over AAA and to make stories obsolete? That's the one thing that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, that's a good question. They're going to talk about stories now.
I don't think so. Esports are a particular type of game. Certainly, I think a lot of AAA game companies are going to want their own esports titles that are popular. They're good money makers.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to take over story games. If you look, this year we had the PS4 Spider-Man game, which has a fantastic story and a fantastic open world, and there's no online multiplayer in the game at all, and it sold like a jillion copies, so it still can be done. I don't think games with stories are going away anytime soon. I think people will still want them and buy them, and companies will fill that gap.
I think it's even healthy for all genres of video games when one comes to really, you know, public attention, because it's a doorway for everyone else, right? One of the things we often talk about, I'm going to seek on a tangent here, one of the things we often talk about in the industry is we're not competing against each other. When my buddies, like, first off, we mostly know people at every other company or almost, be it indie or AAA or like any range of games. And whenever a title is a success, it's good for the whole industry. It's good for everyone because it's keeping us alive and it's keeping us out there. So it's a much more symbiotic relationship, I think, than a lot of people realize.
Can we get back to the ugly question? Maybe not? You got a question? Do away with the ugly question.
Kind of like more of a topic start with Telltale Games and the developers being all laid off. And has there been talk about like unionizing game developers, kind of protecting developers when a game goes bad, or even with the esports, if something goes awry, just to kind of protect a career and protect the entire genre from collapsing and stuff because of poor management skills?
That's a good one. There is a big culture of overtime in games, like working overtime as a marker of how good you are and how dedicated you are, and I really wish it would go away. I'm not speaking of my company or where I work right now, which has actually been really, really good about overtime hours, but there are a lot of companies, when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, they were bragging about their 100-hour weeks. And they eventually walked that back because people were outraged. The amount of overtime you put into a game is not a measure of how good the game is going to be. It's a measure of how poor your management is. And it's also a measure of how many bugs your game is going to have. Because if you are there, I'm sorry, if you are there 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're making mistakes. And you're making dumb mistakes. So I really wish that people would stop would stop seeing overtime as kind of a badge of honor. So there's a poor management problem, but there's also a cultural problem that the people who are in games need to stop thinking that like my 60-hour weeks are what make me great. My work is what makes me great, not the hours.
To follow up on that, actually, there is also a mentality of, oh, if you're not willing to do overtime, you're not passionate enough, and I wish that would burn in the fires of 1,000 suns. The word passion is often used to abuse artists, to pay them less, to abuse, and I'm talking in high general here, across the entirety of art, right? If you're not willing to die starving in a corner for your art, are you a real artist or not? Well, you know, some of us like to pay rent and get food and stuff, and that's important. So yes, we are passionate about what we do, we love what we do, but we should never let it be a thing that leads to abuse. It's really important, and that's often the handle they put on people's backs in order to get them to do stuff, and it's not healthy.
Want to add what do you think for esports? Is that sort of applicable?
It is. I mean, I think anytime there's kind of a grinding culture, you know, or if you just work harder than somebody else, it somehow adds value to your product. And there's diminishing returns, obviously. I mean, there's bugs in my work in a 60 to 70 hour work week for sure. Sometimes that's missed connections with people. Sometimes that's, you know, not enough information. But the culture is still there. I think that goes with players too. You know, a patch will come out and they'll just struggle for something that they were really good at before now just doesn't play the same way. And there's this belief that they've got to work harder rather than smarter. They've got to play more games rather than maybe watch more VODs and see if they can detect something. That time is somehow the currency that you need to spend for creative output of any kind. I think that's the cultural ugly.
Yeah, I think your point is very valid about the creative, that if you're passionate, you don't need to be paid.
Yeah, and I've got another one too, where you were referencing the layoffs. There is a human cost to layoffs every single time. You pay for this with stress and anxiety and loss of money and money you set aside for your future and your children's future. And if you go through many of them, it makes sense to leave the industry. And we've got a talent dream because of that. That hurts us. That hurts, or not a company, like the entire industry gets hurt by this. Because we keep having to reinvent the freaking wheel. And we shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to keep progressing and moving forward and capitalizing on that. And that is heartbreaking. And I've had way too many friends and people that I know who've been affected by layoffs right now to feel anything but anger about that.
How many people in the room are in the gaming industry, just by the way? What do you do?
Yes. I'm in my senior year.
That's still the gaming industry.
Development degree.
Are you at Boise State?
No, I'm at a school in Vermont.
Okay, Vermont. It's a great state. Anybody else? Okay.
BSU's Games Interactive Mobile major.
Okay.
So up and coming as well.
Back row.
Also a game major, graduated this year, and my girlfriend and I started our own company, game development company. We're trying to.
You started your own game development company. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And the fellow in the suit, now you used to have on a t-shirt, now you're in a suit.
So I'm also in the game program graduating this year, but I also work with Dr. Haskell, hence the suit I'll be on later.
Oh, you're going to go on after this?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
He's a broadcaster.
He's one of your people. Okay. Can I ask you, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What made you decide to go get that degree?
I always wanted to be a game developer, and it seemed like the smartest path forward. And so I was never going to do anything other than game development, and that's what I did.
That is awesome. I've got a good for these guys if you want me to go with that. So a good of the game, a wonderful and awesome of the game industry is that we all love talking about what we do. We'll talk about what we do into the ether on Twitter just to talk about it. So imagine how it is if someone comes and asks us questions. So I'm going to give out the networking advice here that I gave earlier today, which is reach out to devs, ask your questions. Tara J. Brannigan wrote a networking 101 that applies to Twitter that is fantastic. If you don't have Twitter accounts, get them. Be aware that when you're looking for a job, we do look at your Twitter accounts. So be kind be respectful to the people you reach out to. Acknowledge that sometimes they may not have time to answer you, but odds are really high if you just follow devs on Twitter, listen to them talk, watch them talk to each other, see what they talk about, what they're interested in, and ask questions about what they do. They will likely answer you. And it's a great way to start your network within the industry.
I'm glad you brought that up, Anne, because this has been, Anne is so generous with her time, and I think she made a very good point about connecting to people on Twitter, which is in the ether, but that community is so tight with each other. And I think her points are very, very, I use Twitter a lot, but I think if you have a community that wants to nurture a community as much as this does, it's smart to get out there and listen in the ether, and then connect. So I'm glad you brought that up again.
We talk to each other, we remember names when they keep cropping up, asking good, smart questions, or just being respectful of our time and not too demanding. But also, I'm in Montreal, which is like a nexus of game companies, right? I'm super lucky. It was never hard for me to find something. And I started in '97 when Ubisoft first built a company, and they trained everyone from the ground up. Never gonna happen again, I was super lucky. But sometimes you're far away, and it may feel like physically, geographically you're far away, but all you need to do is open that computer and start reaching out to people, and you will find kindred souls and like-minded people who will want to help you.
We'll give you their Twitter handles after.
Okay.
Cool.
And it's a good starting point. You could just look at who I follow and go from there.
Yeah, pick her network.
Just please don't ask us what we're working on or when it's coming
Come
out.
on, Ceri.
We cannot tell you we will get fired and we like our jobs.
This fellow right here wants me to get some tips out of you for this next game is on, but it's not gonna happen, right?
Yep.
It's a video game.
Pretty sure it's not. Let's try it out.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Are there any other questions out there in the audience? We're just gonna keep going. Just talk. Yes.
Kind of to change subjects here, but like one of the things I think about when I'm thinking about the bad and ugly of the gaming industry is kind of a toxic relationship that seems to exist between some game publishers and some developers. Do you guys have any insights on that? Like Activision and EA would be the big ones that come to mind right now. Like there's a lot of bad press on them.
I don't know how to say this. I've worked for EA as part of one of their smaller divisions. I like EA. They've been fine. But it's a very individual experience too, and other people probably have drastically different stories, so I can't speak for everyone. EA's got really good politics for their employees and their staff, but they also do layoffs.
Okay, let's do this then. Instead of naming names, let's take it up a level because it is good, bad, and ugly, so we're gonna have to find some ugly, sorry, maybe just one ugly. Good question. Let's take it up. What is one of the biggest problems right now in the gaming industry from your professional opinion?
Work instability.
Okay.
It ties into everything else about the cultures and everything
you were talking about
with overtime and the work instability and the resulting talent loss drain, which I spoke about earlier, that's a huge problem.
Chris?
Wow, did I just time travel? I just time traveled, didn't I? I'm back.
You did, sorry.
Wow, okay. Go ahead.
Burnout.
Burnout, okay.
There are so many, because everyone in our industry is so passionate. I know I've met very few game developers who aren't. They really give everything their all the time, and there are companies who will take it and not give back a single thing. And so people burn out because they feel like they have to be on all the time, and we have to find better ways of managing that, I think, and managing people.
Whose responsibility is that?
Oh my God, on the company side, there's definitely there's a corporate responsibility in a lot of these companies that it's top down, and I want to add too that it's not unique to big corporations. It's not just your Activisions and your EAs or like whatever company of the week. It's everywhere. Small independent game companies can almost be worse because they're like, well, we don't have the money to hire any more people. Or if you get one person who is an abusive person in a company of 20 people, they can ruin it for everyone. So that's it's a problem.
Not to tie it into Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel, but I'm gonna do it. Here we go. The pace of the events is pushing the industry in a way that makes some of these deliveries unreasonable. It's easy to get in a boardroom, I think, with any of these to start talking about this big, huge thing that we want to do. And we, by the way, we want to do that in November at this event. But that creates an overly optimistic hope of what can be accomplished by a relatively small group of people, assuming no one is ever sick, wants to take vacation, and there are no, problems that are out of the realm of creative control.
I have no lives outside of work. Yeah. I'm going to take it down from the high level to the very personal. I tried to retire from the game industry twice in my 21 years. Once I managed to stay away for 9 months, and then eventually went back because a friend offered me something that was interesting. The second time was not so long ago, and I was determined I was done, totally done. I slept for 3 months. I'm not kidding, I was so burnt out. I slept 12 hours a night, 2 naps a day for 3 months solid, and I could have done this for 6 months. And I actually paid enough of my sleep that I could wake. I realized I was waking up and I was not tired, and I didn't remember what it felt like. So I thought I was sick. I thought something was wrong with me because I would just wake up normally at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I did not feel bad. That's how bad it had gotten for me. And then Ubisoft cheated and offered me a museum tour in Assassin's Creed, and I went back to the game industry.
You're like the Godfather, you thought you left and they pulled you back
I held
in.
out for 3 months.
But, you guys, I wonder, okay, I'm just gonna say this, as you probably know now. I wonder if people actually understand, the general public, how much goes into making a game. You're talking about you were so tired, you slept for 3 months. You see a game, you don't realize you have historians, you have, art directors, you have people, you guys, I don't think people know. It sounds like a very interesting, it's very, very intense.
I think people who read those articles and listen when we talk about it know, but I think a lot of people, we think our entire audience is online, and it's really, really not.
No, also, I'm talking about people that aren't gamers and read those publications, general
people
public.
Just aren't savvy, but it's also, it's not just the game industry, right? This happens everywhere.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't think people think the entertainment industry, you just see the surface, right? They don't understand that there's, 10 writers on this. You talked about all the people, the game developers, the art department, everybody involved. It's a massive team.
Or even just every action movie out there. Does anyone think, hey, did a stuntman die while making this movie? Well,
yeah.
Do people think further than? It's a big question. What else is it to say about that?
The people who get up on the stage are not just the people who make the games. I've worked on teams with 1,000 people. Me being here talking to you makes me a huge exception to the rule. There are any number of artists and technicians. We have an entire audio department that we almost never see interviews or people talking about. There are people who build all the buildings. There are so many people involved in every single part of the game. We get to be the face of games, and we're very fortunate in that, but we are not the only members of the team, and I really want that emphasized. I am on a team now of 200 and some people. I'm not sure what the exact number is, and because we're making a big AAA title, which is apparently Aquaman, we talk about it as I know we're a really small team. And yes, more than 200 people is a really small team for the type of game that I'm working on right now. Assassin's Creed titles have gone up to 1,000 people working on the game, so it's huge.
Would you happen to know the game that had the most people on it in your world, working on it?
I'd say look at the numbers on Red Dead Redemption, too.
It might be mine too.
You could be wrong.
I like it as guess though.
I just wanted to add on top of what Ceri was saying, especially because I worked at BioWare and I was a Mass Effect writer. One of the phenomenons we see a lot there is how, and it was a shock to me when I started BioWare, is how valued the writers are specifically by the public, which I was not used to at all because I was never the person people reached out to on any other game I've worked on before. And with it comes a huge responsibility because, as Ceri was saying, I'm just the first step. I put words down on paper, but then we have editors who make those words even better. And then, you know, one of the pipelines is then we have voice people and we have audio people hook it up. But we also have people who make the missions and make the levels. What it takes to bring a game to life is, unlike books or like novels, it's a team. It's a huge, huge team. There's always a lot of people in AAA, anything AAA. And I specify that because we've got Eric Brown here for Stardew Valley, and he did everything on
But you know, like I said, he's going to stop using that excuse, so.
But very rarely in the bigger games, when someone goes I, what they mean is we. Very much what they mean is we. It's never just one person at the head of it.
And Chris, in your world, what have you found is one of the biggest challenge with esports? I mean, you're here in Boise, there must be other esports teams in other cities. So what are you finding as a big challenge in your role in maturing this? Yeah, I'm keeping this.
It's interesting. Well, and you know, as they're talking about the development process, for the last, you know, I've been a professor at Boise State for 11 years, and I've been involved in a number of projects. I've also done quite a bit of industry consulting on different games that are being developed, both in the educational sphere with Muzzy Lane, you guys probably know that one, and then more recently with Zwift and another company who's building a physical interface to a digital environment. Think riding bikes in virtual worlds and all that's associated with it. But to your question specifically about esports, is that we're in the heavy part of the arms race right now, and so there's never an end point. You know, we're about to open what will be collegiate's biggest dedicated arena and battleground, 110 machines, training center, the world-class stuff, broadcast center associated with that. And we're not even done with the installation of that, and we're immediately thinking about, okay, so we've got to go out and we've got to raise money because we have to have, it's the arms race, we've got to have the most scholarship money. We need to be able to offer people full rides, put them up in a dorm. Do we need our own dorm? Those kinds of esports dorms and things like that. So it's an arms race.
Okay, so are you talking about money from publishers, or you have to get private money donations, or is it going to be some collusion, you know, with the
Here's the benefit, and students, and we've got former varsity players here. We've got 2 Hall of Fame Rocket League players here,
Which ones?
right here.
Why didn't we identify?
Yeah, JJ
Why you
and
guys
Isaac.
kept your hands down?
I know,
man?
they're kind of quiet.
But this
They're
one
actually
right here?
first ever collegiate division champion in Rocket League for.
Come
yeah.
on,
They're
come
pretty
on.
awesome dudes. Yeah. But evidently they want to graduate, and so they're not just going to take courses forever and play for us forever. I'm a little upset about that.
What happens when I mean, is there any esports after college?
Well, yeah, there can be.
Okay.
There can be. But it's, you know, it's kind of a selective process. I mean,
Okay.
at the university level, we're trying to bring people in to be great students, great Broncos, to build to their degree, but eventually that ends.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for who's next, and we're always looking to celebrate the folks that we
So
have.
back
But
to this
that's a
money question.
huge- yeah.
Did publishers come to you guys and say, hey, we're going to give you so much money if you embed this? I don't know how this works, but is that something you're facing now that you're in the arms race? Is it tempting?
So that I can be cool like them. I can't talk about all of that. But Aquaman, the game, has come to us.
You're taking Aquaman money is what
It's
you're
an
saying.
open world. He talks to fish. The concept is, I can boil it down this way. It's a moonshot. We entertain every conversation because we don't know what it's going to take to get to a goal that's bigger than the apparatus we currently have.
So there's not a successful business model for that yet?
No,
Okay.
no. But it really is telling your story to anybody and asking if there's a way that they want to be involved, whether it's private investors, whether it's big companies like HP and Omen, to create some kind of partnership.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the partnerships could be tech companies, it could be publishers, they could be big
It could
fat
be
donors.
if any of you have parents that are sitting on $100 or something like
He's
that,
soliciting
trying to
now.
find it, just let it connect us,
Yeah.
and we'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does Boise State rank in terms of esports teams in the country?
It depends on how you rank it. If you talk about the program, we're always mentioned in the top 3 with UCI, Utah, and Boise State. As far as the richest, richest not the right word, the most sophisticated system and acceptance on campus, we've only been active for 18 months. Number 1, if you consider total program games and wins. We have 260 different matchups in 18 months against, I think the number is 165 different universities, and we have the most wins of any collegiate program. I can't tell you how we do it, but here's what's really good about
I read an
esports.
article where it said cheating is one of the biggest problems that's about to come with esports as it moves past its infancy.
Here's the good news, is because it is within the best interest of the publishers to make a game that is above reproach, most of that gets solved. Now at the collegiate level, we identify who we're playing. We stream our games, so the switching players as a substitute is not something that can happen. And there are a number of tools that are embedded with the games. The more mature the esport, the more sophisticated the anti-cheating within the game is. And so we trust the publishers to determine those things. There are no refs in esports.
That was part of the article, was about how there are no refs, but as the games, like you said, they get more sophisticated, but so does the technology to cheat get more sophisticated.
It does,
So it's
but
like
depending
this-
on the game, it's because all of that is black box. What's happening in the game is black box. We can't expose it. We can't put it on our own server and manipulate it. Since none of that can happen, it's much harder. Now, I suppose there are ways that somebody could cheat, but universities who, as we see with the recent scandals as far as admissions, universities are more interested than anybody in protecting their image, so it's just not the same, it's not the same type of thing.
Any questions from the room? Yes. All right, I'm gonna take this all, I'm gonna kind of go to him and come back. No, I'll go to her and then come to you.
Sure.
Do you think an esport can be designed, or does it have to be something that players decide?
Ooh, yes. B. No, I think that's. I mean, games can be designed to be effective in esports. You can't just say we're building an esport and it's going to happen. Not even Apex. Fortnite, which has become one of the things that people are most interested in really becoming an esport. They weren't prepared at all for big competitions. I mean, how long did they have the link down there to set up your own private match? It was like a year, and it still didn't work, still broken, still doesn't work that well. I think they were surprised by it. I think a lot of these games are concerned first with making sure that they have longevity. If it's a story-driven game, they want it to last a good amount of time, but have replayability, different decisions you can make that change it. But I think we decide what's worth watching. We put creative and clever commentators over the time tell us why it's important, why this matchup is meaningful, why this person did something really clever that no one saw coming and changed the meta, and then the game company responds and tries to shift the meta a little bit more or change it often enough with patches that it gets really exciting and interesting. But yeah, I think we make the esport. The game is either just well suited for it or not well suited for it. Hashtag Minesweeper. It's gonna happen.
But there is a move on the part of publishers to design esports titles, and when they do that, a lot of the people that they hire to design are people who are esports players, and we do a lot of closed betas, open betas, testing. We have people advise on what they would like to see in esports games. I haven't done any of this personally. I'm speaking from people I know who have worked on esports games. There's a lot of design that goes into them, and their publishers are thinking in terms of how do we get people playing this, and then once we have groups playing, how do we design the support for that, for things like clans and online play and dedicated servers and all that stuff.
Yeah, as the canary in the coal mine when it comes to Vertigo, I cannot actually play those games and it breaks my heart. I'm a huge fan of Overwatch. I'm thrilled with everything Apex has been getting lately and all the kudos they've been getting. I love the lore and the characters they've been coming up with, and I love the gorgeous diversity they bring and how popular it's been with all the players and how it's being adopted so swiftly. I can't play them, so I just have to stay on the bylines and read all the lore and read up on the characters and enjoy that part of the game, which is doable. So as a non-direct participant, I still get to appreciate a lot about it. And hear my friends talk about it. Did you have a question?
The one over here, we have a guy
No, I was saying 5.
I know, I got you.
Are RTS games dying?
No.
No.
No way. Yeah, real-time strategy games like StarCraft 2. Those games are not dying, but it's due for a refresh, right? Same thing with big open world, MMORPGs like World of Warcraft. That just because it isn't globally, 37 million or whatever its peak was, active monthly users, they don't tell us anymore, right? Just because it's not, that doesn't mean that it's not viable. A lot of the research I've done over the last couple of years is in what I would call dead games and the social groups that still exist within those games. Source had a game called Day of Defeat. If you ever look it up, it's still on the Steam store. It's probably $2 now. If anything, it might even be completely free. And it is the old Team Fortress engine. And so I did a lot of, over the last few years, did a lot of research in why are people still playing this game, which is no longer, it doesn't have any story, it's just map driven. But the truth is, the short version of that paper is, it's the community that's built around it, and that is the tool that they're using to socialize. So those other games, yes, they still have viability, it's just, where are we gonna go to next? And often we can't pick it.
Also, they still play because it doesn't give them vertigo, because I used to be a Team Fortress player. And it was the next generation of games that started making me sick, but I was really good at Team Fortress. Yes.
That parallel.
I also wanted to add, just look at all the adventure games that have been kickstarted and are now coming back into the popular mainstream of video games. It's a cycle, right? I think adventure games peaked with Grim Fandango, which was sad because it was a fantastic example of the genre. It's a classic, right? And then we didn't see many of them anymore because people were like, oh, these don't sell. And I'm like, according to what numbers, buddy? And now it's completely a revived genre.
So we have 1.5 more minutes, and so if somebody does anybody have one fast question, so fast that can be, oh, Harley, really? Your questions are long.
Twitch.
Your questions are short.
Is that as short as it can get?
Twitch, question mark is what he did.
Yes, that's good, I like it. Twitch, question mark.
I think it's actually fantastic. I've never bought into it, so I'm not really into it, but we're seeing a lot of people making a living out of streaming games on Twitch. And it's a great way for them, it's like you're saying, it's social, playing video games is social and communal, right? People hang out together and watch someone play a video game, but also people who can't necessarily play get to experience video games that way, and that's fantastic.
We were talking earlier about people in arcades, just watching people in arcades and seeing all the best players. Twitch is basically that, but it's just on a massive kind of global scale.
We talk about transactional distance, right? The space between the person we're interested in ourselves and what does that communication gap look like? Twitch shrinks it to nothing. And that is why it's a preferred method of interaction. It's not curated except by the person, and that's the best.
I think thank you, Harley, for that fantastic end. I think the thing I think I've been hearing is this coming back, this closeness, the community, and creating things together and doing things together has sort of been the theme over the past couple of days. All right, the end. I'm sure that these lovely humans will talk to you afterwards, and good luck to all you game developer program people out there. Okay, we're done.
Okay, so
every year you sponsor Hackfort, which is, for those of you who are not aware, Hackfort. This is a tech festival that brings the community together to share knowledge and skills with one another. Hackfort.